everybody. Welcome back to today's video. Today, we are going to be going over the first ever prediction of the 2026 governor's elections in the USA. Now, I think this will be the most interesting one because there's a lot of governor's elections up, and there's a lot of swing states that are having different elections for their governors. This sets it as an interesting place to see if to test President Donald Trump's popularity. If the Democrats do really well, then it'll show that since they're the party out of power, that they were able to gain seats across the country. If Republicans do well, they can have something maybe similar to 2022 where they kind of net even. So without further ado, let's get into the prediction. I do think Democrats will be at least somewhat favored, just because, again, they are the party out of power. So usually they're more motivated, more energized to vote. Just like the Republicans were when Barack Obama was president, and kind of like how the Democrats were in 2018 when Donald Trump was president before then. So let's get into it. We're going to go over the safe states that'll be 10 points or more, that are not expected to be competitive at all. We're going to assume that California ends up having a Republican and Democrat on the ballot. That'll be safe. Other state Democrat states will be Hawaii, Illinois, Colorado, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Delaware. I believe that those are all of the safe Democrat states. They'll go for the Democrats by at least 10 percentage points. Let's go over safe Republican seats. Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, South Carolina, and Vermont, with Phil Scott, assuming that he runs again. Those are all of the safe states that won't really be competitive and won't really be talked about that much. We're going to now go on to the likely states, which should be between 5 and 10 points, which becomes when it starts to get kind of competitive. So we'll go with likely Democrat states. We'll start with Oregon. Now, the reason why I'm putting it as likely is because they usually have fatigue over who is their governor. They usually kind of hate their governors. They're usually critical of their governors. And I just think that their governor, Democrat, I believe her name is Tina Kotek. Yeah, she's not super popular, so probably win just shy of 10 points. However, if the Democrats are energized, she might win by over 10. It's a very similar situation with New Mexico. High single digits, maybe safe, depends on what the margin will be. Not much to say. Republicans don't really have much of a bench there. And then we have Minnesota, which I could see potentially get competitive. Tim Walz he was tied with Kamala Harris, who wasn't super popular among the country. You've had some tax scandals come out with Tim Walz in Somalia. I don't want to get too much into that, but he's not super popular. His approval ratings are kind of low, and the Republican State House Speaker, she is running. So to make this race competitive, I could actually, believe it or not, see this fly under the radar and get pretty competitive. But just because of the environment, likely Democratic. We're going to head on to the next one, which we have, I believe, 3 more. We'll move on to Pennsylvania. There's no doubt about it that Josh Shapiro will be facing a stronger candidate, Stacey Garrity, the Republican state treasurer. She's definitely a good challenger to Josh Shapiro. I just think that he's popular enough and well-liked enough and gets funding from his party that he'll be able to win by high single digits. Probably around between 5 and 9 points, if I had to guess. So that's a likely Democratic win in Pennsylvania, in the Keystone State. If it wasn't for Josh Shapiro, it would be very competitive. Because it is otherwise a swing state, but just because Pennsylvania usually likes electing Democrat governors, keep it as likely Democrat. We'll next move on to New York. You have Kathy Hochul. She's not a popular Democrat, typically underperforms the presidential and U.S. Senate margins in New York. She's not super popular. And you have Nassau County Executive Republican Bruce Blakeman running. if he becomes the nominee, I can see Hochul in danger. Possibly, he's kind of like the Lee Zeldin type of Republican. Out of caution, I'm leaving New York is likely, but it could always reach over 10 points. Then we have Maine. Again, no real Republican running here to make this race super competitive, though. Not super competitive. I do think that Democrats will be able to hold this seat. I'm not sure who it's going to be, but that's a likely win. That is about it. We'll now move on to likely Republican. We're going to go with Alaska. I could see this becoming safe Republican, but it's going to be likely because it's possible Mary Peltola runs. If she decides to run, this could be a very competitive election. But as of now, we're keeping it as likely Republican. We'll move on to Texas. You have Greg Abbott running for a fourth term. Pretty established. It's hard to say who he's going to face, but out of caution, it will be likely Republican. We'll have Kansas. Kansas, on the national level, one of the most Republican states in the country. However, statewide offices can go competitive at times. They do have a Democrat governor, Laura Kelly. She's retiring. Again, this is just out of caution. It'll be likely Republican. Kansas can get kind of close statewide offices sometimes. And we'll do New Hampshire. New Hampshire usually is conservative at the state level, liberal at the federal level, another type of that state. Kelly Ayotte, her approval rating is not amazing, but it's not awful. Kind of just average. I think it'll be a similar win to last time, probably high single digits. And then last likely Republican state, that'll be Ohio. You have Vivek Ramaswamy. Hard to pronounce his name. They say he's in danger. I think he is because Ohio, I think, it's just moved too far to the right for a Democrat to win. Include Sherrod Brown. I've talked about that in the Senate video I made. But again, it could be possible. Like in 2018, you saw Mike DeWine kind of. It was a tough race. Republican, he still won it, but it's looking like Democrats made it competitive. Usually, non-incumbent Republicans don't win by as much as incumbents in Ohio. So I think it can get under 5, but just as of now, I'm keeping it over 5 as likely Republican. Probably around 6 or 1 point above that. Careful with how I word myself. Probably around that margin. So those are all the likely states. We'll now move on to the lean states. This is where it truly becomes competitive. We'll start with lean Democrat states. We don't really have much of them, but we'll start with Wisconsin. I think it'll be just barely over a point. It could be even tilt Democratic. You have Republican U.S. Representative Tom Tiffany running. He seems like a strong candidate, but the Democrats are probably going to nominate somebody equally as good. I just think because of the national environment, it'll carry whatever Democrat to the finish line. However, this could be a sleeper flip. Usually Wisconsin doesn't, for statewide and federal offices too, they don't like to vote for people by large margins. It's usually always tight, no matter what it is. I still think Democrats will win it in the end, but that's how I see it happening. As well as Arizona, the Republican primary there seems really divided. You have 3 Republicans running, and it's pretty messy. Whoever ends up challenging Democrat Governor Katie Hobbs is going to be very much bruised from the primary. They'll be weakened. They won't have as much money. That'll be a challenge. And then you have, obviously, Katie Hobbs is the incumbent. She's not an amazing incumbent either. But I do think just because of that and the environment, she'd probably win. Arizona kind of likes a ticket split. They voted for Donald Trump by a lot. But then it also voted for Ruben Gallego, their Democrat U.S. Senator, at the same time. So it is very much a swing state. I still think it is narrowly just by about a point or two going to the Democrats. With that being said, that is about it. We'll move on to the lean Republican states. That will be, I believe we have 3 of them. We'll start with Nevada. You have Joe Lombardo, the Republican incumbent governor. He is probably going to win probably by around 2 to 4 points, it could become likely. I just think because of the environment, he'll narrowly win by under 5. But I still definitely think that he'll be able to win re-election, hold that seat for the Republicans. It is a swing state, so both parties are competitive there. Move on to Iowa. People say that Iowa will be a bigger margin for the Republicans, and I can see why. Voted for Donald Trump by a lot. However, it's the environment, and Democrats are running Rob Sand, the only statewide elected Democrat in the state. He's their auditor general. He is going to make this race competitive. I just think the partisan leaning of the state will not be able to carry him through. He's running against a more establishment Republican, Randy Feinstead, U.S. representative from a pretty conservative part of the state. I think he'll be able to turn out the base enough to win. So this will be about a lean Republican. Probably just shy of 5 points, but we'll see. It could always get closer. And we have Georgia. Some people say this race is going to flip. I really just don't think it will. Just because they seem to usually like electing Republicans for their executive offices, and then a little more very purple on the national level, if not slightly blue, but on the state level, it leans Republican. I just think that, both primaries are divided, but the Democrat primary there is more divided. You just see how the Republicans are just, they seem to be running somebody who's competent. I think they might run Chris Carr, their Republican Attorney General. We'll see. It'll be very competitive. Democrats will probably run Keisha Lance Bottoms. Doesn't seem to be too bad, but we'll just have to see. I think Georgia is staying with the Republicans, but it could vote Democrats if stars align. We'll see what happens. And then we'll move to the tilt state, which is only one, which I have as Michigan. Now, it's very, very, very interesting because you have a three-way race between Democrat Jocelyn Benson, who is the Secretary of State, statewide elected office. You have Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, who was a moderate Democrat and is now an independent. And you have U.S. Representative John James, the Republican. Now, all of them are strong candidates because typically independents don't get any more than around 5% of the vote. However, the polling shows that Mike Duggan is getting up to 10 to 20% of the vote, and he still leans to the left. So he's taking a lot of the Democrat vote from Jocelyn Benson, the Democrat, and she still has her base. However, it's shrinking because you have the Democrat vote split, while you have the Republicans seem to be united around their candidate, John James. Now, there's debate about how strong of a candidate John James is because, yes, he did take 2 back-to-back losses for the U.S. Senate, but that was mainly because he ran in 2 very Democratic environments. But, however, he now has a lot of name recognition, and he is a U.S. representative from a competitive part of the state, just north of Detroit. If you look at the Senate election in 2020, you saw how you had Gary Peters edge out John James, but it was by a very slight margin. What I find most fascinating about this race is that John James was able to win like Kent County, which is home to the second most populous city in Michigan, Grand Rapids. It has trended to the left quite a bit. And you have, again, a lot of educated people who live there. Joe Biden won that probably around 5 points. John James was able to win there. And he was able to overperform the top of the ticket against an incumbent, which is pretty impressive. And you balance out his strong support in the western part of the state, which he's not even from. And then the eastern part of the state, where he is from. Now he's a U.S. representative from Macomb County down in this area, which is pretty swingy. He now has name recognition. He's more established in that area. So I think he has a broad support throughout the state. I still think John James could lose, very much so. It's going to be very competitive. However, to keep it balanced and whatnot, I still think just because the Democrat primary seems to be divided and their vote is getting split and the Republican seems to be united behind their candidate, I'm giving a narrow victory to John James. I think he'll win by like 0.1 or 0.2%. It'll be extremely close. But my prediction is Michigan as tilt Republican. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you agree or disagree. We'll see what you guys think. Let me know down in the comments what you agree on, what you disagree on. Do you think certain races will be more competitive? Do you think they'll be less competitive? Do you think they'll go the other way? Candidates? Tell me what you guys think in the comments. Please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Hit the notification bell. And I hope to see you in the next video.